Okay, Mr. Joey, good to see you again.
Good to see you. How's
We
things?
Yes, we actually very excited because we managed to overcome a few technical issues. This is the second take that
Indeed.
we do today, and we've been postponing this week's session of the consistency podcast. And
It's
I
hard.
was it's
It's
hard to be
hard to
consistent. Yeah.
align. Yeah.
Yes, lots of things going on at work and personal life, and so I've been working with the teams in Europe, and they have obviously different time zones to where we are right now. So I've been jumping in a lot of late night evenings meetings. So that's that's what's taking my time, and the stuff that is hard to postpone. But anyway, so I'm super glad to be connecting with you, my friend. And since conversation, we last week we discussed about the elections a little bit, and for anyone who wants to check the the random conversation that we had about the elections and my experience as a first time voter in Australia, and also Joey took a little bit of time to explain what the process was, which was very enlightening. How to say enlightening?
Enlightening, yes.
Yes, I think that was very very interesting. So this weekend we have a new government in place.
Yes. So it was very enlightening and it was quite a long week, right? Since we last talked. A lot of things happened, a lot of events and news and um last minute, announcements and stuff happened over this last week in the lead up to the election. And then now that it's over, we're still trying to figure out the actual um, smaller details, which are not that small. The one pretty big detail is if there's going to be a majority government for Labour
Okay.
or is it going to be a minority government. So I think one thing we didn't talk about last week was, aside from, getting the most people of your party into the parliament, and that's what um, gets you the the government that rules, I guess, or governs the country. There's also this matter of a majority in the House of Representatives. So you need 76 people of your party or aligned with your party to form a majority. And when you have a majority, whenever there's a vote for a new law or something, if you have the majority, which is over 50% of the seats, then you could very easily vote for whatever law you want, right? So this is fairly common among many governments around the world. So if you have a majority, it's easy to get laws passed because ideally most of the people in that parliament are aligned to your party and aligned to your views and your strategy and all that sort of stuff.
So
So
okay,
at the
I'm a bit so clearly I'm a bit ignorant about this. So what you're saying is that so we voted for like two we had two types of votes, right? So one is for the what is the correct name?
the House
The
of Representatives,
House of Representatives, but there's two, right?
yes. So the other one was the Senate.
The Senate.
Yeah.
So
So
which one is exactly what is what? So the one that is the one that we have the prime minister sitting on. So what? Which one is that one?
yeah, so the House of Representatives is the sort of main thing that people talk about during the election. So the House of Representatives is, yeah, where the Prime Minister sits, where
Okay.
the sort of the big names of both sides sit, and the House of Representatives is basically where laws start. So when somebody comes up with a law, they debate it and discuss it and stuff in the House of Representatives. And basically, when they've done the debates and stuff, they vote on whether or not the law should be passed. And if the law is passed, and again, if you have a majority in that place, it's very easy, relatively, to pass laws. Then it goes to the Senate. And then the Senate is basically a place where people review the law that's being put forward from the House. And so it's more just like further review and discussion. Um, and things might change a little bit with the law inside the Senate. Um, but essentially the main part of the law gets created in the House of Representatives. So that's why that's important, right? That dictates what laws go to the Senate to be discussed, and then from the Senate, once they all vote on the law and it passes, then it becomes an actual law. So that's very, very high level, what happens with the two houses and why you need to vote for both of those things. Um, so yeah, and back to my original point on the majority. So Labour has around 71 or 72 at at right now, in the House of Representatives. To get majority, you need 76 seats, right?
Gotcha. And what happens if
So
they don't fit the? I mean, they don't meet that threshold of 76. They have to
yeah,
ally with other parties.
exactly. Yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
if they don't, yeah, whenever a law comes up, they'll have to then try and persuade the
Mm.
independents and the Greens and the Liberals, but not so much the Liberals because they're probably, always want to oppose what the Labour government does. They'll be persuading and discussing with those guys, about the law. And that's where, especially for your electorate, this is where, the independents come in, and why in this election there's such a big deal placed upon independents. Not just because they are taking seats away from the Liberals and basically helping Labor win, but they're also going to be very important potentially if it ever comes up that there's a minority government, which is what it's called when you don't have the majority as the Labor Party. And I think, yeah, for your electorate, for Hughes, I think it was the resident nut job there, Craig Kelly, has lost, and I think an independent is now, um, in
No,
in
I
your
think
seat.
so. I think based on what I saw earlier today, the person that was likely to get chosen was the replacement of this guy Craig Kelly, and it's
Oh,
a
really?
lady called Jenny something. We can check it out right now. So she's Liberal Party, but I don't know if
Oh,
they
is she?
they finished the counting of the votes, and then after her it was another guy from the Labor Party, and then you had the Independents. Like so, there was a lady called Georgia Steele,
Mm-hmm.
Independent, and yeah, like the Greens they didn't come really high. I think it's fourth or fifth one, like in this huge electorate. So and just to double check, right? So like they just choose one person per electorate, right? That's kind of what
Yeah,
happens. So
for each of the houses.
yeah,
Hughes. Oh, liberals.
yeah,
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. So liberals will retain technically because Craig Kelly used to be a liberal. Oh, okay. Yep.
yeah.
I thought it
So
was an
look, I
independent.
think yeah, no, absolutely. So like back to your comment, I think um like I was really scratching my head last week, like by I don't know who to vote for. And like if you remember that conversation, I was like, yeah, sure, like whatever happens, like it works. Like I'm okay with that, I'm at peace with that. um, but then like you spark my interest in trying to research the like each one of those candidates, including this guy Craig. it's Craig Kelly, right? And
Yep.
like it seems that the guy had claims that like vaccines, uh, like they don't work, and he had like climate denialist. Seems that the guy was quite strong in those positions. So like I said, I'm not like I think like it's better to get involved in like in other policies than that. So and like and what's really interesting to me, like I'm still really, I guess, like adapting to this new like political landscape that I'm experiencing right now, because yeah, like I started researching one by one, including the big parties, the like liberal and also the labor. And
Mm-hmm.
like it's very difficult to find background information on online on those guys. um Even
What do you
today,
mean?
when so like I think like, for example, like this morning I was reading about the main candidates, right, in back in Colombia. And it's people that have like a long trajectory in politics, and like people who tend to become like like people who tend to get chosen for like big elections, like it's people that have long trajectory. And you, that's what you vote for, right? Like you have some like direction in your mind as to like I'm confident with this type of policy, this person has been consistent with these like ways of
Yeah.
managing cash, or like these public policies, or this person under delivered, or sometimes like this person uh, like stole millions of dollars. Like not saying that like that's particular case of any of the guys in Colombia, but like for like like what the media talks how these people, and you kind of form your own decision. And so like for me it was a bit like, I guess, challenging to make the background check on like who am I more comfortable with. And I think that's the reason why a lot of um, a lot of uh, electorates like tend to choose the bigger parties, because that's the ones that you have the most background information.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Am I
You
right?
you make
Yeah.
a really good point. You do make a really good point on that because a lot of the independents were um, not politicians before this, and so they were
Mm,
um, doctors or CEOs in other industries before um, running for this election as an independent. And yeah, there is a lack of information, and I think it goes both ways. Like there's a lack of information because there's also a lack of interest, I think, with within voters, so that you're right, people don't really care too much about the person itself, especially if they're relatively unknown or haven't been in politics for that long, and they rather look at the color of that's next to their name. Um, yeah, as opposed to the sort of personality and the character of the person. And I think that's good and bad. Like you have cases where, like Craig Kelly, the character far outweighs any sort of um, policy position that he has, right? Um,
mm,
but in other cases where the policies that they stand behind are much more important than the person, um, and also the fact that it's more about identity than the character as well. So, like with the Teal Independents, all of them pretty much align with the key um, policies that they're driving, which is climate change and integrity, like corruption and stuff. Um, and then there was a third one I forgot, but those are the key policies, and it's sort of you don't really need to put like any sort of popular or famous sort of person to be able to push those agendas. But then at the same time, a lot of the independents were women that got voted in, and a lot of analysts I've been listening to and reading about have said that that was a sort of vote against the Liberals, against Scott Morrison, um, and against sort of the treatment of women him and his party um, we've seen over the past few years or so with like Brittany Higgins and Grace Tame, who's the Australian of the Year. Those people, had a lot of, they were sort of known now because of um, like sexual abuse and stuff, and also how the government and Scott Morrison treated them in response to all of that stuff, right? So a lot of this independent, a lot of these independent women coming in is basically sort of like a protest vote against that as well. So yeah, it was very very interesting. Probably one the most interesting election ever in terms of Australian ones. I know at times Australian politics can be a bit boring, but this one was definitely interesting, and I hope you thought it was interesting.
Well, just wanted to say that that's interesting observations. The fact that the majority, or I don't know if the majority, but like a large number of independent candidates were women, and that seemed to be a reaction of all of the controversies around, like sexual harassment, and uh, like all of these like female in the government that have been like pushed down like by asshole politicians all over the place. Yeah. So yeah, that's an interesting observation, and I didn't think about it. But still, like to my original point, like I think it needs like high involvement for you to get properly involved in these politics. Otherwise, you just go with the flow, with the mechanics of, like, like I trust Labor or I trust liberals, and like regardless of the person, and the person can be, you don't know if any of the candidates are, like assholes in their jobs. You mentioned that, like a lot of them are just ex CEOs, or like there's like, I know for a fact, because I tried to research a little bit on the candidates in my electorate in Hughes, that like some of them are lawyers, or there's, I think there's one
Mm,
that is a teacher, the guy from the Greens. His name is I forget the name, something Thompson, and
Lee Thompson.
he perhaps so he used to be like a high school teacher, like science high school teacher, but like there's no further information. So anyways, I'm distracting myself. So the point is, like, it requires you to be extremely involved, and really, like really trying to like pick up the conversations. I know that they organize sometimes debates in the local government, so you can go and meet the people, right? But like, for that, I invested my time in doing this, and I wonder how many people actually get involved in that stuff. Like, people have normal jobs, and people have like families, and anyway, so I don't know if that mechanism is, like, will uncover the best candidate just because, just by like purely because it's very difficult to know much more, like, than just the one blog post that you see on their website. And the other thing, and back to your point out, all the independent, or like the majority of independents, right? So they, despite they have like three or four independents on each electorate, like all of them have similar policies. Like, first, climate. Right now, like, everything is around climate. The second one, you
Yeah,
said corruption, and the forget the other two. But it's, like, so it's
probably like
like
cost of
how,
living as the third one.
yeah, yeah. So how do I make a decision, right? Like, so do I go for the teacher? Do I go for the lawyer, or do I go for the neighborhood mom? Like, they all
Yeah,
say the same, right? So
yeah, yeah,
anyway,
yeah. It that's where things get muddied a little bit because yeah, as you observed, a lot of the rhetoric and the things that the parties say and the independents say, they're all starting to converge a little bit towards, especially towards this election near the end of it. A lot of it was converging into those things.
yeah,
As the parties start to really solidify what they know are issues for from the voters, then they'll start to talk about that a lot more. So climate change probably is the most important um, topic for most voters for this election.
yeah,
So the independents jumped on that early. The Labour Party jumped to that also, and the Greens, obviously, that's a key core part of their identity. And then the Liberals. So they all start talking about it because it's the popular thing to be concerned about. Um, and so yeah, there's less of a the the differences are in the nuanced details about like how they want to tackle climate change. So it's less about, oh, I believe in climate change, I don't believe in climate change. It's more that how they approach the issue. So for liberals, it could be seen as, not um, strong enough in terms of policy to hit targets and to sort of mitigate the impacts of our coal exports, for example. Whereas the
Mm,
Greens, they would say no, we want to ban new coal power plants. Whereas the Liberals, they wouldn't do that. Um, so it's in the details of the actual policies and their stances, which, yeah, as you said, it's a bit hard because a lot of it, especially during election, is less about the details these days and more just about optics and sound bites and attacks on others, which is a bit of a inevitable thing. But um, yeah, the voter apathy part of it, the fact that a lot of people don't care as much or don't care at all, means that they have to resort to that stuff to get your attention rather than talking about, oh, my 5 year plan to reduce carbon emissions. It's like, um, this guy's corrupt and this guy's not genuine. This guy's a liar, etc., etc., just to get people's attention.
yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, like on the topic of climate change, um, like obviously, like I feel it. Like every day it's raining like crazy, and I feel I don't know if it's just my perception, but like it seems that the summers are hotter and the winters are colder. Like like gradually
Hmm.
even more and more, right? But I was reading this article this morning on the like on this week's Economist, talking about the impact on like on the wheat trade and some other grains that are coming directly from Russia and Ukraine, and what's the impact on the global economy.
Yep.
Basically, so it looked like my memory is quite fuzzy with specific statistics, but like between Russia and actually, I actually have in the article somewhere here. I wanna read it so you can get a sense. Just bear with me.
Basically, a
It's
large proportion of wheat comes from Ukraine.
Yes. So Russia and Ukraine supply 28% of globally traded wheat. 28%.
Yeah.
29% of barley, 15% of the maize, I don't know how to say that, and
Maize.
75% of sunflower oil. So they have, like, so, like, if you think about it, like almost 30% of the
Yep.
of the wheat, which is like basic ingredient for like or basic nutrition for I don't know how many millions of people around the planet, and when you check the stock prices like for these commodities, like the prices, like everything in the planet is going to hell, like all of the stocks, like all of the major indexes in the planet, they're going like free fall. Like all these commodities are increasing the price because obviously like there's a shortage in supply, and in all of the like major countries that also have this type of supply, they're being more protectionist with this stuff. But anyway, so by all the way I wanted to tie it back is because um, some of these major economies that also have some supply of wheat are countries like China or India, and what the article was highlighting is that with the Niña and El Niño, like the weather, what is it called, el fenómeno de la Niña, the what's the right term
Yeah,
for
it's just
that?
like weather. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
they're just that's what they're called, I think. They're just like
yeah,
cycles,
yeah,
climate
with La
cycles.
Niña, with La Niña. So that's also that's gonna exacerbate the impact on like on the shortages of wheat specifically. And now like they're forecasting that, like even like big economies like China, they're gonna keep some of the supply like for themselves, and or they're not gonna be able
Wow.
to meet the public demand or like the or international demand. And like so for more developed countries like Australia, the States, like some countries in Europe, yes, like there's going to be an increase in price on the consumer side of things, but ultimately the main impacted are like poorer economies. So like a lot of countries in Africa, in like Middle East, like Egypt. Like there's a bunch of countries that are basically like severely impacted, and like typically always the people who suffer the most are the poor people, right? And yes, there's again a component of war, and hopefully that stuff gets resolved, and like so to regain some balance, but it's exacerbated by climate change. So like some extra impacts of that stuff that maybe we don't see every day, that has long-term impact on like people will die. All
Yep.
that to say that people will die.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really it's a little bit crazy how much climate change has accelerated in terms of um, issues for people and for voters. And compared to like even the last election, which was 3 years ago, I think I saw somewhere that in the previous election, climate change was maybe like the fifth um, most popular concern, and now it's the first. I think by a long way in some measurements. So the fact that we're actually seeing the effects of climate change now, and we're seeing so many weather events and natural disasters, and food shortages and stuff, water shortages, that it's pretty much undeniable for you know most sane skeptics of climate change that it has to be due to changing climate. It has to be due to greenhouse gases that are put into the atmosphere by man. And now I think one silver lining, if you can call it that, is the action to resolve it and to mitigate this climate change is probably also going to accelerate. And like to me, it was a big relief that Labour did win, um, and we did see that climate agenda actually play out in the election, because then it's a big message to the government, right? And it's also a big message to a lot of other governments, uh, especially the US and China, because they're have direct relations with us, as Australia, right? Strategically, and also with trade and stuff like with China. So this new government hopefully is going to push the agenda a lot more. Um, Even though we're a small country, we export a lot of coal, right? Which is a greenhouse gas emitter. And um, yeah, there's gonna be a meeting on Tuesday. It's like the Quad meeting. Um, it's like the US, uh, Japan, India, and Australia. So they're gonna meet on Tuesday, and Anthony Albanese is gonna go there on Tuesday. That's his first thing as the new prime minister. And they're going to talk about all that stuff. They're going to talk about climate. They're going to talk about the conflict in Ukraine and how that impacts um, everything in terms of resources like energy, and also food, as you mentioned, like staple foods like wheat. And so yeah, this is like just the beginning, right? The election was interesting, and a bit surprising, not super surprising because liberals are in a really bad spot, but the next few years are definitely going to be a lot more interesting, and a lot more change is going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I'm starting to to learn that like the topic of climate is extremely complex, right? Like it would be awesome to say like boom by snapping my fingers, like I'm just gonna reduce like the consumption of like like petrol based like machines, or
Mm.
let's stop mining, or like
Yeah.
uh, or how, I don't know, like all the things that like you can throw out outrageously, but obviously like there's communities that are supported by that stuff, so it's incredibly difficult for any person in a position of leadership to create a solid plan that is very urgent, obviously, and lay it down in a way that like provides with like with some sustainability and like some maintenance for the families that are currently under support of these communities, or of these like industries. Yeah, so it's very difficult, very interesting. Definitely I need to learn more about it, and I'll learn more about it because very important.
So one recommendation that came up, as you were saying, that is a YouTube channel that I found. So I love YouTube. I watch
Hmm.
YouTube all the time. I don't watch Netflix. I don't watch any of that stuff. It's exclusively YouTube.
All right.
Um, because there's so much content on YouTube, and it's mostly pretty good and interesting. And then there are some other weird parts of YouTube, obviously, which we can delve into another time. But one channel that has a lot of really cool videos, interesting, well-researched videos on climate change is it's called Planet A, and
Okay.
it's made by the it's made by DW, which is the German news organization. And so they create a YouTube channel where they do videos on a bunch of climate related topics, like um, uh, things like uh, clothing, like fast fashion. They talk about palm oil, and a lot of other things that are directly related to climate change. And they talk about stuff um, that people don't usually think about. So the complexities, as you mentioned, they sort of delve into that. Like for example, um, batteries, right? So you mentioned mining. We should stop mining. Like, well, we should stop mining coal and stuff, right? We should stop using coal to power everything. We should start using more renewables, and we should start using batteries to store the renewable energy, right? To maintain our um, electrical supply. But a lot of that comes down to getting enough raw materials to build the new solar panels and the new batteries. So mining is actually a really important part of the renewables shift, right? And that comes with obviously the environmental impacts of mining itself. Um, and also the human impacts of mining itself, especially for rare earth minerals like out in Africa and China and stuff, and the political impacts of purchasing rare earths from those countries there. And so it gets really complex, and there's a whole chain of stuff that you um, sort of delve into as soon as you think more deeply about, oh, we need more renewables. How do we get that? So on and so forth.
Interesting.
And so those videos cover that pretty well in a sort of um, concise and clear way, which is, I think, the most important part. And it's really interesting to listen to and watch. It's really well done. So that's one recommendation that um, that is for you to look into.
Thank you so much. I will most definitely check it out. A recommendation for you. Actually, look, um I love The Economist, and whenever I have the time and the opportunity, I download a copy of The Economist, and I try to read like the key article that I find interesting. By the way, there is I don't know if you are familiar with this, but there is an app called Libby app, which is connected, like it's integrated with the network of libraries that we have in Australia, and you can get access to not only economists but a bunch of like free magazines that are
Oh wow.
like top level magazines. Like you have Nat Geo, the economist I mentioned already. There is like even like entertainment magazines. You have comics. Like there's a bunch of things. There's hundreds and hundreds of different magazines that you can read like for free, as long as you have obviously the library card. So but anyway, so all that to say that like this week's like article on the food catastrophe and what I was mentioning before around the impact of both climate change and also the war on the food is very interesting. I'm learning a little bit. And actually, I had a second recommendation, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, um, so I don't know if you remember a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned this podcast or like this company called Gimlet Media. Remember? Um, they're
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
They made a podcast about a podcast.
Exactly. So this guy, like when he started like his business, when it was consolidated as a business, so he said, okay, so now I need to bring another podcast, and the guy found these two guys that they've been podcasting on technology and the impact of life in technology and how like technology and the internet is intertwined with our lives. So that podcast used to call, so the name is Reply All. And when I first like heard this podcast, this was maybe 5 6 years ago, like I got super hooked, and it became like one of my favorite podcasts for a long time. And I don't know, I'm not, just let me shorten the story anyway. Like for many reasons, that podcast just went in decline, and they last week they mentioned that they were gonna like finish it, and that was quite disappointing. And basically, like what happened is that like I don't know, like 6 months ago or 1 year ago, like one of the two hosts, like he got like I don't know if he was fired, but like he got pushed out of this podcast, so he wasn't a host anymore of the Reply All. And for a long time, the guy went silent. Like you could, like he was always very active on Twitter, and like he basically disappeared. And I found this week, and that's my second recommendation, like a new podcast that the guy just went solo with, and it's called Crypto Island, and it's fantastic because I think this guy, his name is PJ Buck. Um, I'll send you a link, and maybe when we post this video, we'll put it in the notes if anyone wants to
Yeah.
check it out. Um,
Awesome.
so so his background is in I think he's in journalism. So he's an excellent storyteller, and I guess like since he left Reply All, like he's been getting like involved in the crypto world, and just trying to like make sense of what it is and what it isn't. And it goes basically in a rabbit hole, like exploring like obviously the hype of cryptocurrency, but also like what is the like all of these like appearance that it has of like Ponzi scheme, and like it's getting a lot of like negative attention for good reasons, right? Like a lot of people are losing millions of dollars, especially like in the past la few days since the
Yeah.
crypto market like went to hell with this Luna cryptocurrency. Like
Yep.
anyway, yeah. So anyway, so he, I think he's doing this podcasting like in on weekly basis, and it's fantastic. I recommend it. Crypto Island.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll post it in the show notes, and we'll check it out. Um, but I think that will do us for this week. I think that was a
Excellent, my
great
brother.
discussion.
It was indeed. Okay, I'll see you next week. I think we should try to record um like before Wednesday, and then we'll
Yeah,
push it on the weekend.
sounds good. Well, thanks everybody for listening in. And
Okay.
until next time, we'll see you later.
Ciao, ciao. Ciao.